Thanks for listening to Eat Your Content. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast through my merch store on TeePublic. Get great quality items like t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all sporting the vibrant Eat Your Content logo. Go to teepublic.com/user/eatyourcontent for more great items, and thanks for your support. Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast. I'm your host, Rich Herrera, and this is your home for all things food and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in. You have a lot of podcasts to choose from, but you chose mine, so thank you for that. On today's episode, I have a special guest with me. I love collaborating with other podcasters, especially local podcasters here in Jacksonville, when I get a chance to. So I'm very happy to have Connor Overbay of the Who Are You Pod guesting on my podcast today. We're doing a little crossover event. This is part one of a two-part series of us crossing over into each other's podcasts. We're stepping into each other's universes and just kind of talking, having conversations. And in my specialty, we're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about pop culture a little bit. And then on his podcast, we'll talk a little bit about me and how we got started. So to catch part two of that episode, make sure you follow the Who Are You Pod with Connor Overbay, and make sure you like and follow and subscribe on social media at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content to make sure when new episodes are going to drop and you'll be notified. So make sure you hit that notification button. Connor, thanks for coming on the pod. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your platform and get to learn more about you.
Oh, well, thank you. And learn about you too, because you have a very interesting pod. I listened to a few, and you're very hyper focused on the local area here and local businesses here. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about your origin story. Kind of want to get to know you a little bit. What was your life like before starting up this podcast? And you've been doing it for a while, about 3 years, I think. So kind of talk to me about, what was your life like before that? And what was the catalyst that made you want to start a podcast, and talk a little bit about the subject matter of the podcast that you do?
Yeah, that's nothing, no problem at all. So Who Are You? So my life, I've always been a very active guy. I've really enjoyed working in the community, whether through charity work or getting involved in some way, shape, or form. With me, I was born and raised here in Jacksonville. I'm 25 years old. Lived here my whole life. And the way I kind of grew up, I played sports. I know you can't tell from seeing me sit here in the chair, but I'm 6'4", 6'5", played basketball growing up my whole life. And I found a niche with being able to talk to people. Growing up, I was always around adults. So I didn't want to be that annoying kid that was like, hey, look at my trucks, or, this kind of stuff. So I found ways of talking to adults and, trying to be interesting. And as I was doing that throughout my life, I just found that I had a knack for talking to people, and I genuinely care about people. So really the catalyst for the podcast is I would come home, the job I was working at the time, I was doing pest control, get home at 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd be sitting there and I'm just scrolling my phone. And growing up throughout my life, I've kind of dealt with depression and anxiety and other issues when it comes to that stuff. And I wanted to put that energy that had me focusing on that into, whether it is brightening someone else's life or helping promote my local community. And I just sat down one day and I was like, you know what? I'm a huge podcast fan. I listen to podcasts such as like Joe Rogan, Two Bears, One Cave, really a good mix of them, the Even Sports podcast. And I was like, you know what? I can talk to people. And I just started it. It was originally going to be called the Florida Man Podcast, but you look online, you see 1,000 of those. So I looked up and kind of came up with the name Who Are You? And that's when I knew that was going to be the base of my podcast and learning about people. I think the human condition is very interesting. You grew up differently than I did, and I feel like it's good to put those stories out there so some people don't feel alone if they're going through a similar situation.
So this podcast kind of started out as an extension of of maintaining your mental health, right? Of talking to people and having an outlet. How do you choose your guests? Like a lot of the pods, I've listened to a few of the recent ones, and you do highlight a lot of like local businesses, and you're very Jacksonville focused. What made you decide to kind of stick around with Jacksonville versus maybe some would say a more broader audience and talking about more broader things that would appeal to others beyond the Jacksonville city limits?
So, it's really more comes down to a budget of traveling and everything. With my style of podcasting, I like to be in person. That's always been my style. I feel like I can read someone a little bit better by talking to them in person. So really currently it's more of Jacksonville's my home, and I want to promote local people here in Jacksonville because there's a lot of amazing people here who are doing good things in the community. And some of them don't have social media. Some of them don't get picked up by the news. So I always like to find those little people who maybe have fallen through the cracks and give them an opportunity to tell their story, whether it's good, bad, or, how they made it to where they are today. Everything in between. Very big on that. And the mental health side of things, I'm very big on as well. Having men talk about it. I'm sure, don't know how old you are, sir, but when it comes to, the older generations, that was very much a close to the chest thing. Guys didn't talk about it. And the way I look at it is, if I didn't start talking about it and doing what I'm doing now, I wouldn't be here sitting with you today. So I'm very proud of being able to talk about strong emotions and things that people are a little bit scared to talk about, and putting that out in the world so other people don't feel alone.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, mental health nowadays is so important, and there's so many ways now to reach out and get help, even if you're not comfortable with like going into an office and doing the traditional laying down on the couch and talking to somebody. There's virtual ways to get mental health. So to put a spotlight on that and to encourage people to talk to somebody, I think is great. So you're doing a great thing, and that's awesome. Don't call me sir, man.
It's the southern part of me.
I'm old, but man, I'm not that old. So, yeah, I find it interesting. You're kind of a unicorn in terms of Jacksonville born and raised. I've been here for 10 years. I have not met a lot of Jacksonville born and raised folks that have lived here. And listening to your pods, I can definitely tell a love of Jacksonville. Do you think Jacksonville kind of gets a bad rap among some of the other cities in Florida about, we don't get the attention that maybe like South Florida gets or maybe like Tampa Bay gets?
I totally understand what you mean there, but the change, I really felt like ever since I was a kid and seeing the development of Jacksonville, it has grown so much. I remember when Beach Boulevard turned in, all a couple other areas were just trees. And now it's grown up to the point now where we're over 1 million people in our city now. Businesses are coming here. The Ritz-Carlton, artists are wanting to come here. The Jaguars. Unfortunately, this year they're not doing that great, but the Jaguars have really helped bring more attention to Jacksonville, and it's really becoming the place to be. We're one of the biggest. I think we are the biggest city in the United States by landmass, and just really, as you said, the attention not being on us, I think, is actually a good thing because it's really starting to show people the surprise of what Jacksonville has, whether it's through our food scene, whether it's through our local artists, our athletes. There's a lot of names that are running around here that I can see really making it big time and being on whether it's the big screen or becoming national recording artists. And I think it's really starting to put Jacksonville on the map. And I think we're going to be the next big city very soon.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been here 10 years. I've grown to love this city. I lived in Savannah for a long, long time, so I've come to Jacksonville before. But living here for the past 10 years and just seeing the growth in these 10 years that I've been here has been pretty amazing. And it feels like it's still a big city, but it feels like a small town, and you have your little pockets of neighborhoods that people are kind of loyal to and don't leave. So it still has that small town feel, even though there are a million people. When you think about it, man, 1 million people in Jacksonville, it's almost hard to believe. But yeah, there's been a lot of changes, and I love that you're highlighting a lot of local Jacksonville folks. How do you find your guests? Do you just kind of, are you reading a paper one day, or are you watching something, or you see an article online, you're like, oh, that dude would be great on my pod, and reach out to him? Or how does the guest roster come to you?
So for me, anybody I have on the podcast is someone I am genuinely interested in. We're very lucky now that we've established ourselves and been here for 3 years and, pushing really hard on it. So we are very lucky where people reach out a lot of times nowadays. But in the beginning, yeah, I would look on Instagram. I would look on different places. I would even watch the news to see who they highlighted. And if I thought they seemed to be a genuinely cool person who was trying to uplift Jacksonville and not trying to just have their 5 seconds of fame, I'm very much open to it. And my big thing is, I don't care if you have 1 follower or 10 million followers. If I enjoy what you're doing and I feel like I'm genuinely curious about it, I'm more than happy to have people on the podcast and help, give them my platform as an opportunity to help show their things and help them grow as well. Because everybody on the podcast, it's not about me. It's about the person who's sitting in the chair next to me and them telling their story and, being vulnerable and, put themselves out there, because it's hard for a lot of people to get in front of a microphone and the camera nowadays and be like, I don't know what to say. My most common comment I get is, I don't know what I'm going to talk about for an hour. And then we talk for an hour and a half and they're like, oh, wait, it's been an hour and a half already? I'm like, yeah, it flies by.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you talked about the start of your podcasting, and I think when I started my podcast a year ago, the barrier of entry now for starting a podcast is really low. I mean, there's a lot of free options out there for people to start a podcast, and if you're like me, well, you're not like me, but for me, I don't have a studio. I'm looking at your background, and you have like a studio, and I know that came with like years of doing different things and testing things out. So what would you kind of give advice to somebody that wants to start a podcast on? Man, I have this idea, like kind of like you wanted it to have an extension of your mental health and talking to other people. And what advice would you give somebody that wants to start a podcast, just going out there and trying to do it?
I would say you don't need to buy the big fancy equipment. A lot of people see the Shure microphones that say like Joe Rogan uses, or these bigger podcasts use, that are 300, 400, $500 a piece. You don't even need that. You can have a record app on your phone and sit down with someone else and just go from there. There's a lot of free things. Like for me specifically, like my audio editing, I use Audacity. It's free. It's a free application that you can use. It does everything you need it. There's a million videos on YouTube for you to watch if you want to edit your audio there. And really just start. That's my biggest thing. I sat there and mulled around with the idea of podcasting for a while. I was like, I'm very much a researcher. I look into things and I'm like, okay, what do I need, or what is this? I started off my first piece of equipment that I bought, and this was a little pricey at the time, but this was something that made me commit to this, was I bought the Rodecaster Pro audio board. And to be honest, it's the best piece of equipment I've ever bought. It's sitting right beside me right now that I still use to this day, 3 years later. And it does everything I really need. It mixes. It does. You can add 4 microphones into it. You can add sounds to it just by a quick application on your computer, and you can look everything up on YouTube as well with it. And I feel like you don't need the fancy equipment. You can start with just your phone. And if it's really something you're passionate about and you think you are going to continue doing it, start investing in it piece by piece. With me, I started off with that Rodecaster Pro audio board. I got 2 microphones that were like $30-$40 on Amazon. And that was really it. I didn't record video until probably 1 year in of doing the podcast. And I started recording off my phone. And finally, I saved up enough money through working my 9 to 5 and bought a camera. And, everything around me that you see that's on the studio is from Amazon. To be honest with you, I think I spent $400 or $500 on, the chairs, the banner that's behind me, all the different walls and everything. And since we're talking about it, I'm going to show you what the studio looks like. This is just the wall platforms, and then everything you see right there, including this painting, are from local artists here in Jacksonville.
That's great.
Yeah. And to be honest, it's not like I have a big recording studio or a house or anything. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment and just built it up piece by piece. And that's why I would give my piece of advice is, baby steps. You don't need to spend $10,000 to, put everything on. And then you get, you're just starting out and you get 5-10 listeners. That can be discouraging for some people. And then, like, what do I spend all this money for? And then you stop. I think you just keep going, try a couple times, see if it's something you want to continue doing, and you go from there. So me and my wife started the podcast 3 years ago, pretty much now. We put one out every single Monday. Besides the 1 week that we didn't put one out was the week that me and her got married. And besides that, it's just staying consistent.
You're like, all right, let's get this honeymoon over. I got a podcast to upload.
Funny enough that you say that. We literally recorded a podcast the day after our wedding, because we ran a thing where we called them Sunday Hangouts. So it's a podcast inside the podcast. So it would be a monthly podcast where me and my wife would sit down and, we would do like funny questions like would you rathers, your top 3s of whatever subject you could think of. And we'd run and let the audience know what we were doing as we were planning our wedding. I even put a little teaser in there. I did an interview with someone else where she wasn't here. And I was saying, hey, I'm going to propose to my soon-to-be wife. And, we're going on a trip to Colorado, and brought them through the whole saga of getting married and planning a wedding and doing all that. And to be honest, it felt very personable, and I thought it was really a good time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So How has life changed for you since the podcast? Now, you've been podcasting for 3 years. You're kind of an established name in Jacksonville now. So, have you found that your podcast, you kind of have some leverage now in getting guests, or people are coming to you now to be on your pod and asking you to collaborate with maybe their businesses? Have you found that kind of success? And what other things have happened since your podcast started 3 years ago?
To be honest with you, it's really, I've always been an extrovert, but it's also helped me become a better listener. Sitting down and listening to people and actively listening so you can add something in, or maybe you add a piece of yourself into the conversation with it. But to be honest, I've got to meet a bunch of amazing people who are doing amazing things, whether it's, their business or their art or everything. And I've been able to make friends, and it's helped me get more involved in my community. That's my big thing, is being involved in my community as much as I possibly can. I love Jacksonville. Very lucky to be from here. I didn't feel that way when I was growing up, but as I've gotten older and matured as a man and seeing what's available here, it's helped me be very excited about being and proud about being from Jacksonville. And really just meeting a bunch of people, to be honest with you. It's been a very cool experience. I've met some really cool people. I've met some interesting people, and just get to learn some stories. But that it's also helped me change my perspective on things as well. Hearing people's stories where we get pretty deep on some of the conversations. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. We've had some very serious conversations, whether it's about people dying or someone losing a loved one, or even them talking about suicidal thoughts and everything. And it's really helped me kind of change my perspective on my life whenever I'm having a bad day. It also gives me something to look forward to every single week, meeting a new person and being able to get a conversation where we don't know where it's going to go, and putting that out there to the world. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat. So I want to pivot to food because that's what my podcast is about, food and pop culture.
I
We
love
talked
food.
a little bit before. Yeah, I love food too. You don't get a body like this by not loving food. So you before the pod, we were talking a little bit online and stuff, and you said you worked in some restaurants growing up. Is that right? Did
Very
I?
true.
Okay, good. So, kind of tell me about that. What restaurants did you work in, and what was your experience like doing that?
So the restaurant world is interesting. My very first actual paid and taxed job was at Five Guys Burgers and Fries. I worked there from, I believe I was 16, 15, 16. I was driving, and I made it all the way from being the person who took your order and made it all the way to assistant general manager with them. And it was an interesting experience. It taught me a lot about how to deal with people, problem solving, being a teammate, and getting involved as much as possible. I'm sure some people who work in the food industry know not everybody's the happiest person when they come to your restaurant, and if you put one wrong thing on there, they get mad. So it taught me problem solving, taught me what the real world is like. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, as I said earlier, and it was a good experience, to be honest with you. It taught me hard work, how to continue to grow and go for what I want, and it was a great experience. But I worked at Five Guys Burgers and Fries. I worked at a place called Chicken Salad Chick, where they make chicken salad. Zoe's Kitchen, which is now called Cava, I think is what it's called now. Where else? Some Mexican restaurants, Applebee's, really a mix of places. Being a young kid in college and everything, jumped around a little bit. And actually, I met my wife at from working at Five Guys, so it was a
Oh wow.
very cool thing, and it changed my life in a lot of ways that I can see now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think everybody should work in the service industry at least once in their life. I think people will gain a better understanding of other people by doing that. And because I think if you don't, then you kind of get a little bit of the sense of entitlement, like you walk in and people are there to serve you, versus if you work in the service industry, you know what they're going through and you're a little bit more empathetic. So I think everybody should do that once in their life. So I want to talk a little bit about the restaurant scene here in Jacksonville from kind of our perspective as consumers. So you've been here all your life. I've been here for the last 10 years. What have you noticed, if anything, about the restaurant scene here in Jacksonville? What kind of things have you noticed? Wow, that's kind of neat that we got that, or it's amazing that we're getting this, or anything that jumps out or stands out to you from that aspect?
I feel like there's a lot of things that are pretty cool about Jacksonville's food. It's not just burgers and fries. It's really all ethnicities, all kinds of people who are, putting their food out there. I just had someone recently on, like Fat Boy Fried Rice. They're a food truck here in Jacksonville, and they sell, I believe it's Filipino food, and I think there's a mix of maybe Samoan or something in it, but where they do fried rice. Such a simple concept, and they grown it to having 3 different trucks, and now they even have ghost kitchens now. They just announced the other day. My personal favorite restaurant here in Jacksonville that I go to every single year for my birthday, and people are going to scoff at it, is Flying Iguana down at Neptune Beach. It's one of my
Oh, this
favorite
place is
restaurants to
great.
go. Oh,
Yeah.
I love their food. Good margaritas, so I can't complain there. But the scene's definitely grown. There's people who are trying different things now. I really say the biggest thing that's changed since I was a kid is the food truck scene. It's really exploded. Apartments now, every single week, you say, even at my apartment, we have a different food truck that comes through. There's like people who make lumpia, something that maybe most Caucasian people maybe have not tried in their life. And it's really helped expand people's idea of what food can be. And I think food is a great conveyor for people to sit down, have a conversation, put the phone away, and actually be a person rather than hiding behind the screen or worried about what's on TV. So it's really grown, it's gotten bigger, and I think it's really cool to see all the different kinds of things that are coming through.
Yeah, I agree with you. The food trucks. When I moved here in 2014, that was just when food trucks became legal. Like they weren't,
Hmm.
legal until then. And from since then, it has blown up. And what I've been loving seeing since then is these food trucks turning into brick and mortars. Like they
Yes.
become bigger and they're expanding. And you kind of think about some of the OG trucks like Happy Grilled Cheese. They got
Yeah.
into brick and mortar, and they have a location out in Austin, Texas now. And then, the most recent example, you have Abstract Filipino Essence. That
Hmm.
was a really popular food. Actually, they didn't even start as a food truck. They just started out as pop-ups, and then converted to a food truck. And then they have their own restaurant now. So I love hearing those success stories. And yeah, food trucks are around all the time now. And I think it's great. You get a huge variety of food. And I think it's great for owner operators. It's less overhead than a brick and mortar restaurant, and it gets them established so that they can become bigger. But yeah, I agree with you. Food trucks for sure have grown and been huge since 2014. So let's talk a little bit about some of your guests. You mentioned you had the chefs from Fat Boy Fried Rice. You also had a few other foodie guests on your pod, on the Who Are You pod. So tell me a little bit about some of the foodie guests you had, and yeah, a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, I've been very lucky where we've had many foodie guests, whether they're chefs, owners, operators, and really good mix of people. Had the opportunity to sit down with Chef Eric Olsol. He's the owner of McFlamingos and I believe the executive chef at the Ponte Vedra Inn and Club. Sat down with, as we were talking about earlier, the guys from Fat Boy Fried Rice. And funny enough, I went to high school with them and didn't even know
Oh
it.
wow,
As,
yeah.
as a them, who else have I had on? I'm really trying to think. We've had a good mix of different kinds of food guests on. We also had, Big Rich Knows Jax, awesome guy, and I know he's a guest on your podcast as well in the past.
Hmm.
We've also had the founder of Snacksonville, the food page where they go and recommend different restaurants, give solid ratings and everything. And it's been very interesting for someone like me. I grew up in the kitchen. My mom taught me how to cook. My dad taught me how to cook. So growing up, I've always just kind of had a love for food. I remember watching like Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmerman growing up, or Anthony Bourdain's show, or even like Chopped. And I think it's very interesting. But the guests we've had on there, we've talked about how they came up with the ideas for their restaurants, and whether it's going and finding their menus, how they develop whatever they want to do, or what kind of lane they want to go into for their food, and really just a mix of things. And they tell me what the idea of the restaurant means to them. Just for example, like McFlamingos, his is more about being like gluten free, a little bit of a healthier option, but something that still tastes good. And then Fat Boy Fried Rice. Obviously, we are talking about the different kinds of fried rice that they make, whether it's a mix of different meats on it, and everything looks delicious on social media. And then watching like Big Rich and also Snacksonville, I've watched them for a while now, and seeing all the different places they go to gives me ideas to go try new things and reach out to new people, and we talk about everything. So it's an awesome experience.
Yeah, I love seeing the local guests that you have on that are foodies, and expanding it, like, and me watching them. It's like, oh, I need to go try them. I need to go try them. I need to follow them on Instagram or on TikTok and get recommendations. So I love that you're highlighting those folks on your pod for us locals that want to depend less on, sorry, of Google and Yelp, and get some real locals in here and saying, okay, here's some good places to eat. So you mentioned like other shows that you watch, like Chopped, and that's something I cover on my podcast is food on TV. Are there any kind of food TV shows that you watch on a regular basis that you like, or any foodie movies that you've enjoyed in the past?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of, like I said, Chopped, Drive In and Dives with Guy Fieri. Like I said, the Anthony Bourdain show, the Andrew Zimmerman, Weird Foods and everything. I've always just been interested to see what different cultures make, and I think it's really interesting because it kind of tells the story of their culture. Some places where food is not as available, whether it's meat or like grain or fruits. It's interesting to see how humans have really evolved to be able to survive off certain things. Like, here in the United States, we don't eat bugs. A lot of times we don't eat bugs. And besides, sea bugs like, lobsters and all that. But to see, you go to other countries like Indonesia, you go to Asia, where some people eat tarantulas, some people eat ants or even ant eggs or, a mix of things. So it's interesting to see what other cultures consider a delicacy and what us as Americans would kind of scoff at. It was like, oh, I don't know about that. And that's just because we have such an abundance and we're lucky enough where we have food coming in all times and, fast foods all over the place. So I found it really interesting to see what other cultures make and, makes me excited to try new things.
Yeah, I love watching Bizarre Foods when it was on, and seeing some of those things that are just weird to us but are normal to other people. And you really do get a sense of other people's cultures when you eat their food. Like it's what we were talking about before is being able to sit down at a table and share food with somebody, and that's how you get to know other people and how you get to know other cultures is over a plate of food. And one thing I'm a big advocate for is, if it's hard to yell at people when you're eating, right? So that's when I think you should have some really good conversations is over a plate of food. So that's awesome, man. So I love your pod. I love what you're doing. And I want to give you the last few minutes here to kind of let people know where they can find you on socials, or on where on what podcasts they can catch you on, and give you just a chance to promote any projects or anything that you got coming up.
Hey, I greatly appreciate it. And like I said, thank you so much again for giving me the time to be on your platform. I always enjoy collaborating with people here in Jackson. Anytime I get a chance to get interviewed, I do greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much again for taking the time to sit down with me today. But to be honest with you guys can give me a follow on anything, all social media. It's going to be at Who Are You Pod for everything. YouTube, we did finally start our YouTube channel this past year. I think we're about 15, 20 episodes of actual video podcasts on there. So it's going to be Who Are You podcast. And really, just keep an eye out. I'm sitting down with new guests every single Monday. We got some big ones coming on, such as you, as they got you coming on soon, which I'm very excited about. Have you on the studio, get to come check it out in person and kind of see what we do here. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for your host of this podcast. We're going to sit down, get a little deep on him. I don't know if he's prepared for some questions, but I'm excited to get into there and learn some more about your life. And yeah, that's really all about us, man. We pretty much sit down with local people here in Jacksonville. We do plan to expand outside of Jacksonville here soon. Start going out to other states and everything, but still will always be a host here in Jacksonville, Florida. And yeah, we're super excited. It's gonna be some cool stuff. Start going out to some events, start getting out there more in the community, and being on site a little bit more for other businesses as well. So always keep an eye out every single Monday. Come out at 5 a.m. and we're on all audio platforms and everything.
Awesome, awesome. So there's a local business or local artist or creative that wants to collaborate with you or reach out to you to say, hey, I think I'd make a good guest on your podcast. How can they reach you?
So the best ways to reach out to me are either on social media. Anything you guys see that's posted or anything on there on the social media is me personally. I do all the calendar work. So if you guys are interested in being on the podcast, definitely reach out. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Not sitting here saying that everybody gets on the podcast. It is a little bit selective just to make sure it's a good fit for us. But if you feel like you would fit our content and you think it would be a good time to be on the show, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you, whether it's through social media or you can email me. It's going to be whoareyoupod@yahoo.com, and I'll make sure I reach out to you within about 24 hours. Some days get a little busy with work and stuff. So, but I'm always there, and you're always talking to me whenever you reach out.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Connor, I want to thank you for being on the pod, and I look forward to part two. If y'all follow Who Are You Pod, You'll hear part 2 of this episode where the tables are flipped and I'm the one getting interviewed on the Who Are You pod. So it should be fun. Unlike Connor, this background is all fake. This is all green screen. So I'm looking forward to actually sitting down in the studio with you and talking with you in about a week or so, and having that uploaded and having everybody kind of listening to both of our podcasts. I think it'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, I appreciate your time, Connor. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Yes, sir. I look forward to seeing you on our podcast. And thank you again so much for your time today. And I look forward to seeing it come out. Thank you to all your listeners for checking it out as well.
Thanks for listening to Eat Your Content. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast through my merch store on TeePublic. Get great quality items like t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all sporting the vibrant Eat Your Content logo. Go to teepublic.com/user/eatyourcontent for more great items, and thanks for your support.